So, mate, look, first, thank you very much for coming on Northern Vibe. You've come as, it's not just me that wanted to get you on. I've had a couple of people ask to get you on, and I'm really excited to have you here. But, mate, let's get right into, well, controversial is the wrong word, I suppose, some perspectives that you have. And first thing I want to actually talk about is drugs, which is something I know you know a fair bit about, being the former officer in charge of the Cairns Drug Squad here. I mean, what's your personal feelings on the legalisation of cannabis?
Well, Matt, it's probably a yes and a pro and a against sort of answer. I suppose I'm sitting on the fence a little bit, but certainly through 34 years of policing, I think that the courts and policing in general is tied up, I think, unnecessarily in the small cannabis users. And I think prohibition hasn't worked. I don't think there's a simple response or a simple answer to fix that. But I certainly, from what I see and what I've dealt with over the last, as I said, 34 years, I don't think prohibition has worked for the small amounts of cannabis that are sometimes presented for the court.
Right. So Australia was never really part of the war on drugs, but as a law enforcement strategy, it kind of, your feeling is it doesn't work. And we're talking specifically about cannabis here. I want to make that crystal clear. This is not about drugs generally. We're talking about cannabis, a type of marijuana. So what's your reason? So your basic reasoning, as I understood that, was it's kind of ineffective, it's sucking up a lot of resources and it's not working. Now, do you have the same feelings about other drugs? And if we can go through specific ones, and I'd like to go through each drug and your different reasoning and experience. Let's start off with heroin.
Yeah, I think overall, Matt, I think, and this is my opinion only and not backed by research, but I think if you look at the cross-section of society, there's going to be a certain percentage of that society that's going to have the addictive personality, whether it be gambling, whether it be use of drugs, whether it be the fanatics in sport. They're going to have that addictive personality where they live off the need for whether it's a natural drug or whether it's a manufactured or otherwise. So I think the drug, my view on drugs generally is, yeah, cannabis should be decriminalised. The other drugs, yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one for me. I think prohibition across the board hasn't worked, but I wouldn't like to, put the heroines and the amphetamine type substances in with cannabis. But I think that's something that could be looked at further down the track. There's interesting policy in obviously Holland and also Portugal have different sorts of policy on the use of the harder type drugs. And again, whether that's working or not, I don't know. But it's I think it needs to be looked at. Certainly as a start, I think cannabis, as I said, should be decriminalised. And look at how that's managed, how that's worked into the future, I think, and then from there, maybe look at other systems and other policies from around the world instead of just drawing on the experience of the US, which I think a lot of countries have done over the years.
Yeah, exactly. Look, for me, I mean, and this is just my personal kind of, I suppose, character arc growth on this. I started off pro criminalisation. I was thinking, well, we need to keep this out of the hands of people. In my 30-year career, something I have never heard, especially with marijuana arrests, is like, "You've changed my life, constable, senior constable, sergeant. No, I'm never going to touch cannabis again." Now that I've been arrested, it simply wasn't an effective strategy. But initially, the decriminalisation debate was unfortunately held by people who kind of wanted to use it and wanted to promote it. And now there is consensus around that, okay, well, these things are bad. We know that use of cannabis, even though I kind of like don't care about people using it, if you have a predisposition to mental illness, like, you just shouldn't touch cannabis. You know what I mean? It's something that ends up really, really bad for you. And increasingly, there does seem to be links from the stats, as you know, I read a fair bit of this stuff. there does seem to be a correlation between use of cannabis and mental illness, especially your anxiety and depression, especially long term. But it's not just about that. I mean, there's justice issues. It's about the legitimacy of law. It's about if you're enforcing a really unpopular law that most people aren't obeying, you're undermining the legitimacy of law itself, which is something that I know that we've had conversations about and kind of genuinely concerns me. So look, my understanding is, you have been prescribed with cannabis personally. Is that something we can discuss?
Yeah, but most definitely. And just before I go into that, I didn't raise earlier about the use of cannabis by developing minds, and I think the teenage years are a bit of a worry period for teenagers generally, but I don't think cannabis mixes well with developing minds, and I think it is, as you said, linked to mental illness. For me, when I had my leg amputated above the knee 4.5 years ago, throughout that period, I've been prescribed various types of drugs, legal drugs, and one of which I tried several years ago was medicinal cannabis. I tried it for several months, but with drugs and pain, sometimes some drugs work and others don't, and it certainly didn't do what I needed it to do. So for me, I used it as a trial to see whether it could reduce the phantom pain and the other sorts of pain that I get with the amputation, but it wasn't for me. But I joined the police force at 19. I wasn't smoking pot when I was a kid, and it was the first time I'd policed it, but I'd never used it. And certainly with the prescribed cannabis, I tried it to see whether it would work, both CBD and THC, and it wasn't for me. But a lot of people talk very glowing terms of what it does and how it can change them. So I'm all for that, the medicinal side of things, and I'm all for under conditions, I suppose, and that's probably not the right word to use, but as I mentioned, there's certain developing minds. Young people shouldn't be using it. It takes away all their drive generally, and it can lead to mental health illnesses.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's like pretty much, as you know, the technical medical term for a drug is anything that alters the way your mind or body works, excluding food. So we need to make the exclusion of food, because food alters the way that your mind and body works. And there's been serious discussions in America by the FDA to include sugar in high amounts as a drug. So this is a very, very complicated area. But the sweet irony of the officer in charge, the former officer in charge of the Cairns of the Cairns drug squad, who was disproportionately chasing cannabis people, ending up using it. And
you mentioned earlier that you started off from the point of we are indoctrinated when we go through the police academy, and as we progress, we are indoctrinated in certain ways. And you're of the view initially, in the unthinking mind, that cannabis is bad, and all those sorts of things. But the longer I'm alive, the longer I was policing, I just I saw all those wasted resources and all those people with records, criminal records, for possession of minor amounts of cannabis, and I just don't think it's right.
Yeah, and it really does. Again, we're kind of like if you have a law that's affecting, God, I mean, my understanding of people who try cannabis, and I've never tried it either. Like even now today, I still haven't tried it. So I'm, for complete clarity, I'm sure I don't need to say this, I'm not advocating the use of cannabis. I don't think it's a good thing, but I think if people want to do it, it's none of my business. Go, knock yourself out. As long as it's not causing any societal harm, what you're sticking yourself is really not the government's business. And that's the thing. Like for me, I'm a big believer in the rule of law. Now, one of the things the rule of law really requires is for laws to be popular, widely self-enforcing, and to the point where people will cooperate with both the enforcement of the law, so they'll give you information on it and stuff like that. They'll turn up, prosecutions at courts, and that links with the legitimacy of authority. If you start undermining those things, you're undermining the legitimacy of police authority, you're undermining the legitimacy of the courts, and those things are of great concern to me too. I mean,
I suppose, Matt, you can liken it in the 90 up until I think 1989. Homosexuality was illegal in Queensland, and the whole story was, what goes on behind closed doors really should be left there. And I remember policing events where homosexuals were targeted and arrested, and given criminal records for homosexuality, and 10, 20, 30 years later, you're hearing somewhere where those charges have been exonerated.
Yeah, and
we may talk the same in 30 years' time with cannabis. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of suspect that's going to happen. But all right, so look, you've lost your leg. Actually, really quickly, I will just jump back to that and tell an amusing anecdote that I know you're kind of like familiar with. I was in America, and I met a municipal, as you know, they have municipal police services over there. And I met the boss of a municipal drug squad, and he basically held the same position, and it was a comparable size drug squad too. It was about 25 people. And this chap had been in his state and city when drugs were legalized. And what he did, because he goes, as soon as he knew drugs were going to be legalized, he partnered up with his best grower, who of course had convictions, the best grower that he kind of like knew, who had drug convictions. So there's no way this guy was going to get a license. So this bloke knew everything about the growing marijuana, and indeed about the sort of unlawful marijuana industry. He was never going to get a license, and he needed someone to handle the HR, the licensing, distribution, and security, because of course it's a valuable commodity, so they actually need security over there. And so he ended up partnering up with one of his growers, and I asked him,
a bit like Breaking Bad.
Yeah, well, it was more. It's more like Elliot Ness, who when they asked him at the end of Prohibition, what are you going to do now? He said, well, I'm going to go have a beer. And Elliot Ness actually died of alcoholism, ironically. But like, I mean, for him it wasn't personal. Like, it wasn't a crusade. It was just a job, and he made more money. I didn't ask him precisely how much, but he's like, so how much money are you making? He goes, oh my God, Matt. Oh my God. I'm making a little bit more money than I was in the police, let me tell you. So you just never know how things are.
In the start of it, I think is the legalizing medicinal cannabis and seeing how that works in society and who benefits from it. So
exactly. Actually, I'm going to put one of the links at the end of this interview. There's he's an acquaintance of mine, Dan Hannon, who's a member of the House of Lords, actually, over in England now. And he put out a video on this just recently with some of his discussions in the House of Lords. So I'll include that at the end. But look, you've lost your leg.
Just before that, Matt, if you haven't had the chance to read a book called Chasing the Scream, Chasing the Scream. It talks about prohibition, how it was all US driven, and how it's worked in some places around the world. So it's a good book, Chasing the Scream.
Okay, I'll put that in the hyperlink as well.
Yeah,
I just got to write that down. All right.
Sorry, I lost my leg 4 years ago, Matt. After I had knee surgery in 2007, and 2 years, I think 2 years after they put the knee joint in, they had a recall on it because of a high incidence of failure. And as a result, I went through a series, I think about 16 or 17 surgeries over a period of about 8 years, 5 total knee replacements, 5 major infections, and the infections nearly got me in the end. And they took my leg off 4.5 years ago. So it was above the knee. So yeah, well, that was a huge thing that happened in life. Not only obviously medically retiring early, but also adapting and adapting the house, learning how to walk again. I think I went to 50 or 60 rehab sessions with an occupational therapist to learn to walk again. And then there's the getting used to the prosthetic leg that you're given. You start off with a basic model, and you work your way up to where I'm at the moment. I've recently acquired a $70,000 prosthetic knee, which I'm using at the moment. So.
Wow. So I mean, what caused all this was just your knee just going out? What was it, like old football injuries, or like, just
what caused it was the faulty part that went in the knee, and I think on the first occasion, it was. I'm a bit restricted on what I can say here, but it's it is as a result of a knee operation and a lot of surgery, infection, and then the leg came off. So yeah, it was a long haul. It affected everything. It affected the family. It affected my employment and all that. So
yeah, lost your. I mean, had to retire earlier. But it sounds like an absolute nightmare. But I understand there's been some positive sides of it too. Can you tell me about the shark attack survivor you met in your rehab group?
Yeah, one of the guys I was doing rehab with, young Glenn Dixon. I think he's just recently turned 30, but he's from Mission Beach, and he's got his own gym down at Mission Beach called Survivor Fitness. And he had his leg bitten by a shark. He was out spearing. He was telling me one day, and he said it was one of those days that you probably shouldn't have gone out spearing. It was the water was murky, and he'd just speared a fish, and he went to the surface and pulled the spear up with the fish attached to it. And he said the next thing I knew, my whole leg was inside the shark's mouth, and it shredded his leg all the way down. And he said it kept circling him, and he said I thought he was going to bite me again. So the shark went up to him, bit his calf off, and then swam off. But luckily, he got to the boat. There was someone still on the boat, and luckily there was an ex-US Navy medic on board the vessel, and he died half a dozen times on the way to Cardwell ramp, where they got a medevac down to the medevac him to Cairns, and he survived. And he's an amazing young man. He's on the talking circuit, well worth a listen to. He's got something to offer, particularly about resilience and how to deal with situations. He's got a young family. He's got 4 children. And he's managed to get through all this. And he did tell me that as a result of the attack, he's a member of the I think the Shark Attack or Shark Bite Club of Australia. I think he said there's about 100 members, and family, of course, and some of the ones that didn't survive. But you've got to keep these things light, and he's got a good sense of humour, and as do I. It's no good keeping things dark and hidden. I think one of the good things, I'm quite the hit at schools and preschools, and the kids think I'm Iron Man, and quite often I'm walking around the shops, and you can see the 3 or 4 year old kid spots me first, and then he starts tugging on his mum's shirt and saying, "Mum, look at that man, he's got one leg," and you try and normalise it, Matt, and you stop and talk to the kids, and it's not. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not embarrassed by it. It's just one of those things, and I think the more you normalise a disability, and I don't like using that word because I don't think I'm disabled, but you try and make normalise it so people, the big thing. There's a scheme called the National Disability Insurance Scheme, the NDIS, which looks after people with disabilities, and a big focus of that is to get people out in the community, because it is tough to get out and about. It takes a lot of effort to get up and pick yourself up and put the leg on, make sure it's charged, and get out in the community and do stuff. And as an amputee myself, I don't see a lot of amputees out there, particularly above knee amputees, and it's a shame. I think people need to make the effort. They've got to force themselves. It's not easy, but there's a big difference between an above knee and a below knee amputee. With the below knee amputee, you have that knee joint, And I'm not taking anything away from people with below knee amputations, but you know, to have that knee joint, you can do a whole lot more activities. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't help but think of Douglas Barter.
Yeah,
back in the day.
Exactly. You know, and he had the prosthetics of that day. You know, I struggle with the prosthetics of today. You know, the microprocessors in the knees, and he would have had, you know, harnesses around his waist and probably over his shoulder to hold it on. Nowadays, you do everything on vacuum, so it's you know, you have a liner on the skin, and then you put the socket over the leg over the liner, and then it creates a vacuum, and you've got a release valve on it. So it's you don't need the waist belts and the harnesses. You know, it's those sorts of things would be dreadful in the heat we have in North Queensland. It's bad enough with the socket because it just fills up with so much sweat, and you've got to stop and take it off and drain it out.
All the sweat out.
Yeah, I remember we were on holidays. We were in Costa Rica there a few years ago, and we were walking through town, and the leg just filled up within half an hour. And the only place I could find was a Catholic church in the middle of the capital of Costa Rica, and I sat in the church, took my leg off, you know, bared my stump, and a few Hail Marys, and drained it out and put it back on again. But it's probably one of the most interesting places I've actually, because it is a process. Sometimes you have to drop your trousers if you haven't got the right pants on, and it means dropping the trousers and draining the leg.
So I mean, pardon my ignorance, but you're talking about these microprocessors and the suction valve. So, all right, so you've got your stump.
Yep.
And again, it's above the knee here. So we're talking about, you know, your femur, your thigh.
Yeah.
Like, how do you put it on? Like, how long?
Yeah, what it is, I remember the occupational therapist said, she said, you got to be careful with that stump. And, you know, she goes, if you hit the end of that, it's like an apple corer. The femur will come out through the bone, through the flesh. And so I've always remembered that. But and what happens is the quadricep muscle that was there, they roll that over the femur, and then as a bit of a pad, so that when you put the liner on, it's got something to rest on. And it's also I call it the muffin top principle. It's the socket's a little bit smaller than the residual stump, and so you put your liner on, you put your stump into the socket, and it's just got to stay half an inch above the bottom because you don't want to bottom out. So as a result, there's two ways. You can either do the muffin top, which I'll talk about, where there's a little bit of fat hanging out the top, or you have a part of the socket that rests on your bum, which is very uncomfortable. So I choose the muffin top one.
Right. But mate, you're still getting around. My understanding is you're still getting around. Like, you know, you kind of were on the farm up there a while, and I don't know if you got any films or photographs or anything you kind of want to share. But you still are getting out and about, you know, and kind of making all this stuff happen. And you've had some excellent support too, from my understanding, from your family. Yeah,
very much so. It couldn't have been done, particularly my wife. It could not have been done without her. And it's you know, you look at any person with a disability, and it's all the background work that gets done that you don't necessarily hear about.
Yeah,
I do have one photograph, Matt. I might show you. It was me with back in the day when I had two legs, and
okay. And mate, while you're digging that up, a big thanks to Kim, and g'days to Jerry and Sharpie. And Sharpie's got both of his titanium knees. Okay, so where's this? Tell me about this happy snap.
This is one of my sons. I've got 4 sons, but this photo was when I was working in Papua New Guinea. I was running a team out of Ley, and that's where I was medevac from when I had my last infection, or second last infection, where they had to medevac me out. The knee blew up, but that was me in uniform with 2 legs with one of my sons. But that was working with the AFP and the Royal Papua New Guinea Constabulary, and based in Ley. So
right, alrighty, mate. Have you got any? Can you show us without wanting to be too morbid or anything, like, can you dig something up with your current with the current prosthetic leg, so we can kind of have a captain cook of that?
Yeah, what I've got here is photo of me and my boys, as my 4 sons. Yes, I'm the shorty amongst it all. You can see the that's the knee before I had now. That one's waterproof. So, but they're my 4 sons.
All right. And you're at 6'4" and the short one.
Yeah, I'm 6'4" and the short one. Yeah, that's it. I do carry the weight advantage, Matt. But
yeah. But all right, crikey, and mate, learning to walk again. Tell me about that.
I'll just before I do that, I'll just show you another one with.
No, keep going with the happy snaps. Actually, you know what?
This one resonated with me because it was local Terry Fox from Canada. This was taken at St John's in Newfoundland in Canada. We were over there a few years ago, and Terry Fox had bone cancer, and he had his leg amputated above the knee. And I ended up seeing the contraption he had on his leg at the time, and he had a waist belt, and I think he even had something over his shoulder to keep that leg on. And it was his plan to run across Canada and raise money along the way, but unfortunately he had a relapse and died before he got there. But he's very well known in Canada and very well known in the amputee world. And yeah, such a shame. I think he was only 22 or 23 when he died. So he's such a remarkable young man.
Well, I mean, we were talking about Douglas Bader before, and I remember reading all of his books, Tin Legs Bader. As a kid, this guy was flying planes, and like an ace, and shot down, and oh god, just amazing.
I think he lost his legs in 1936 before the war, and they medicaled him out. And he said when the war started, particularly the Battle of Britain, he said, "Hang on a sec, I can still fly." And he did a few modifications, and off he went. And absolute legend.
Yeah,
he was shot. I think he was shot down and taken prisoner. I think he got held at Colditz, Colditz Castle, and with all the other escapades that people tried to escape. And I think at one stage they had to drop in a spare leg to him. The Germans were forthcoming in that arrangement and let a Spitfire drop a spare leg for him so he could use it at the time.
And apparently they used to take his legs off him at night because there were a couple of escape attempts. Like he tried to get out. Like,
gotta do it.
What a legend. But mate, learning to walk again. Take me through that.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of falls. In the last 4 years, I've had both shoulders reconstructed from falls. I've had a broken foot and a broken toe. So it's I don't bounce quite as good as I used to when I was younger. And all it takes is for a wrong. When you're walking with prosthetic leg, it's all straight back, and sideways or angles are just without rearranging the feet, it doesn't happen. And if you do, that's when you go tumbling over. It's you think you can move sideways or on an angle, and you can't. It's got to be a conscious decision to move the waist, move the legs around, and then move forward or move back. But it's sideways moves aren't real good.
So it's basically you are literally learning to walk again.
Oh, you have to consciously, even now with the microprocessor of the leg, you still have to consciously flick your stump through to make the leg. And the biggest thing was that when I first started wearing a prosthetic leg was having trust and faith in that leg, because when you're walking along, you can't feel the leg hasn't come through. Like, I know when I was up the farm, the tufts of grass, you're walking along and you think the leg's following through, and it hit in the foot or the toe hits a tuft of grass, and before you know it, you're going down because you
can't feel it.
That's right, you can't feel it. But there is a thing called osseointegration, and you mentioned earlier, I wanted to talk about my time on Christmas Island, one of the leaders in the world, and certainly as Australia, is a bloke called he's an Iraqi doctor, Munjid El Madiris.
Yeah,
he's doing surgery for a lot of amputees, and what happens is they put a titanium rod up into the femur, leave an open stoma around the end of it, and then attach the prosthetic leg to that. I've talked to people that have had this procedure, and they feel like you get your leg back, you get a feeling, a sense, you can feel the floor, you can feel the walk. And interestingly, Munjid came through Christmas Island, and and not in my time, but certainly at a time before I was there when I was working.
Well, we've just had a question from the audience. Jerry wants to know, any of your boys follow you in the coppers?
No, not at all. I've got 2 carpenters or 2 chippies, 1 lawyer, and 1 finishing off a Masters of Education. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. All right. Now, okay, I'm kind of tempted to jump forward and jump back again. But you know what? We'll stay with Christmas Island. So you got sent to Christmas Island. You're in the AFP, to give some contextual. You're the detective superintendent there. You get sent to Christmas Island. What was your task there? What were you there to do?
I was there for I think 3 or 4 months, and it was my title was senior officer on island, senior, so SOI, senior officer on island. So I looked after Christmas Island, and particularly the management of preparations. We had the public order unit there. We had negotiators. We had investigators. Then we had and also we had the local Christmas Island police, which were also AFP. So my role was to obviously liaise with the detention centre, which was run by a company called Serco. Liaise with them, liaise with all the other Australian government departments, and at the time I was. It was just at the time when they were reinstigating the processing of detainees to move from Christmas Island to Manus Island in PNG, and also to Nauru in the Pacific further east. So I was there. It was an extremely busy time. I think we were having up to 7 or 8 boats arriving a week, and they were trying to get into detention, and they were trying to get into Australia, and the government put a kibosh on that.
Yeah, look, when I was stationed in TI, we had a couple of boats come through. Ours were Chinese. We had some Indonesians, and also some Pakistanis. And my understanding is that there's a disproportionately high amount of Pakistani blokes there. So I can imagine games of cricket.
Yeah, it was. There was Iraqis, Iranians, Afghanis, and Pakistanis. But the detention centre is modelled on a prison. It's we weren't allowed to call it that because it wasn't a prison; it was a detention centre. And the oval was used frequently, and quite often you'd see inter-country cricket clashes out in the centre of the football field. And that is come true.
That is so good, man. I would have. I'd love to go out there and face. That would have been pretty cool. Yeah. But look, I don't want to get too much into especially the political side of those sorts of things, because I've had a couple of guests who are from, I suppose, another perspective. Brian Cassie, who went to Manus Island and did some photographs. He has some very strong views on this. And I respect them, and I'm sure I don't need to say this, but chaps like you and me, because I have detained illegal immigrants and put them in, and I don't know where they were sent after we detained them in TI, because it was long before the wave of boat people. I think they were just pretty much sent directly back home. Had a couple of African chaps too who came through as well. Now we all respect the right of legitimate refugees to come here. No one argues that. But in your experience, what was the proportion of legitimate refugees to people who were either taken advantage of by people smugglers or were using the services, I suppose you'd frame it, of people smugglers?
Yeah, I think in Australia we've certainly got an obligation to take on more refugees and more immigration. As to the breakdown of people arriving at the time when I was there, it was certainly a mix. I think the biggest thing for me against arrival into Australia by those means is it's just so dangerous. they're at the hands of people smugglers. They're in boats that are very certainly unseaworthy, and the Indonesians who are doing the people smuggling, they know that vessel they've sent them on is on its last legs, and because they know they're not getting it back. So so it's not particularly seaworthy, and it's just such a dangerous journey. It's such a long and dangerous journey, and there's been some terrible stories come out of those vessels disappearing and hundreds of people on them. As to the type of people, there were certainly some genuine refugees in there, but certainly there was some military. You could tell they had military backgrounds. Certainly, I think in some occasions there were special forces guys from Iran and Iraq trying to sneak through. Certainly, some came with demands too. They one in particular made a comment about the Scots College in Sydney and wondering if he could get his child into that educational institution because he heard it was such a good school. So certainly they've done a lot of research, and even upon their arrival too, they're allowed to make phone. They're given phone cards and they can ring back home and they can use the internet and all that. So they're not lacking in contact with the outside world like a normal prison, like a prisoner would. It's not controlled like that, but yeah, certainly it's a mixed bag of people that do arrive.
Right. And look, just getting a little bit of love on Facebook. Yes. So some people have asked me about the issues that we're going to cover off on. So we're going to be we've already discussed the amputation side of things for Ms. Russell, and to the law enforcement officers who are making comments. Yes, we're going to get to Brad's experience from that and his management experience and his takes on all that, as I indicated in there. So we've pretty much, Ms. Russell, we've pretty much finished up on the amputee stuff. We'll, if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to put them up and I'll pose them to Brad. But I really wouldn't mind starting to go into your career. Now, you started off in the QPS and then you moved to the AFP. Can you kind of like, can we I suppose we'll run from earliest to latest, yeah. And mate, tell us about joining the QPS, and any of the big interesting jobs that you did in the police. So give us a brief overview of your career and interesting jobs.
All right, yeah, I joined the Queensland Police Force as it was then, not service, in 1984. Went through the Queensland Police Academy. Some of our instructors were Wayne Bennett, obviously the football coach, and also Mel Meninga. They were our PE instructors. We did, I think, just 6 months or close to 6 months at the police academy. And my first posting was on the Gold Coast. Where I attended a lot of different stations and watch houses, and gained a lot of general duties experience. I think I was there about 12 months, and I was transferred to Mount Isa. And surprisingly enough, Mount Isa was a great place to work, and there were a heap of young fellows there. In those days, there weren't a lot of female police officers. I think we had 2 per squad of 30. That was the general rule. So as a result, there wasn't a lot of policewomen. I think when I first got to Mount Isa, there were only 2 policewomen. They were both sergeants, and there were certainly no constables. So I was transferred to Mount Isa, and luckily I had a good look at the place. I worked in a lot of the remoter stations, Julia Creek, in Burketown for a little while, and visited Doomadgee and Mornington Island and Normanton, and worked in a place called Dejara, which is about an hour and a half south of Mount Isa, and not much more than a pub in the town, but certainly covered a vast area. I think the Dejara and Duchess Police Divisions covered, an area the size of Tasmania, and right to the Northern Territory border. And here I was, 19, 20-year-old, and taking on all the tasks. And I don't think there's enough emphasis and kudos, I suppose, put on police officers for what they actually do, and certainly at a young age. And the military get a lot, and rightly so. But I think there should become a time where a lot of law enforcement get the recognition that we see things on a daily basis, crime scenes and traffic accidents, and having to deliver death messages. And I remember as a 19-year-old knocking on a door at 2, and this is before social media, you know, where they had the landline, that was it, knocking on a door at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning and advising mum and dad that their daughter had been killed in a car accident in Western Australia. And I still remember that woman screaming to this day. The husband answered the door, and the wife came out. What do they want? What do they want? And yeah, he was grief stricken, and he told her, and she just screamed. And I still remember that. And you know, the dead bodies you see, the mutilation, the mangle, the post-mortems, all those things, they build up over time. And I think there wouldn't be too many police officers without PTSD in some form. You know.
Yeah, I agree, and I want to get on to specific cool incidents that you've been involved with, because you've had a very interesting career, and I know you're quite modest about it. But a couple of the bigger jobs that you've been involved in, like I'm pretty sure you apprehended, I think it was that chap, Peter
Sterling.
Yes, Sterling, who was one of the escapees from Brendan Abbott's thing. I want to quickly comment on that. I agree with you. Yeah, like there are all those sides of the police that are tough, and especially now in the current times, we're kind of perhaps not getting the amount of love we deserve. But I got to say this: I'd have done it for free for the first 10 years. You know?
Oh, don't get me wrong, mate. You know, there were many times I've worked, you know, particularly working in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, and I'm sitting there and again, I'm getting paid to do this. How good's this? You know, you got to pinch yourself. It's just some of the experiences I've had is, you know, I remember in PNG in the early, 20 years ago when I first went up there, I'd been in the remote locations in the Gulf province where, you know, I wouldn't see a white face for 2 weeks. And, you know, it's, it puts into perspective how, you know, how Indigenous people of colour see, you know, feel when they're surrounded, you know, where they're the only, you know, black face in a white group, and it certainly put into perspective to me. I kind of know how it feels now. Sometimes, luckily, I work with some good people, but it certainly is confronting. And
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But mate, some of those big jobs you did over there in I don't know, I think it was the Solis that because you were head of, like, it was major investigations or something, and there were a couple of government ministers who were pinched on your watch. Can you tell us about that?
We I remember the day, April 18th, 2006. There was a prime minister elected, which the general majority didn't want. As a result, I was working in internal investigations, Solomon Islands Police, and I was at the bottom of the hill where Parliament House was, and I remember vividly that there was a huge eruption at the Government House, Parliament House, and what we didn't know at the time is some CS canisters have been dropped in to disperse the crowd. As a result, they came down the hill in a wave, and literally it was a wave of people, I think thousands, coming down the hill towards, you know, the building that we were in. So they started ransacking all the shops they could, and they spotted our vehicles, and we were, well, I think it was second or third floor up, and so we were taking photographs and trying to get some evidence on what was going on. And the next thing they saw us doing, taking photographs, and next thing, Solomon Islanders are good at throwing rocks, and the reason is that they kill bird life to eat and supplement the diet, and as a result, they don't miss too many when they throw rocks. And later on, during the investigation of this matter, and we didn't pick it up at the time, but several weeks prior to the lead up to the riots, there was strategically dropped loads of rocks around the town, and we didn't pick it up, and we only learned later that that was purposely done for if there was a riot to occur, they had the ammunition to throw. So there we were up in the building, 2 or 3 floors up, and next thing they start pegging rocks, and as I said, they're accurate, and all the windows started cracking around us, and they started rushing towards the building. We had a chain mesh fence around our building, but we tried to, I think there were about 7 Australians, including civilian staff, tried to get to our vehicles, and we got rained on with rocks, so we couldn't get away. We put in an urgent call for other AFP members or Solomon Islands to give us a hand, and they pulled up at another entrance of the building. And just before that, I remember we were upstairs and we could hear, there were two entrances, and we could hear a mob of people coming up the back entrance, and we were trying to get out. So I think the first thing we tried to grab was the main frame of the hard drive, and so that wouldn't be stolen. So we took that and bolted down the stairs to the assistance of a couple of cars that were going past, and we threw all our staff in. And I remember carrying there. We had a civilian female girl that she was only tiny, but I remember grabbing her by the back of the pants and just throwing her in the back of the Toyota. And we had Solomon Islands with us. One of them was Juanita Matanga. She was an inspector at the time, and she ended up being deputy commissioner of the Solomon Islands Police and acting commissioner at times. So, but they were just as terrified as us. And over the next month or a couple of months after the riot settled down, what they did that night is they just ransacked China. There was a part of town called Chinatown. They just ransacked and burnt all the building. And this is a pretty important message, I think. The old "don't bite the hand that feeds you." And the whole of Chinatown was burnt down, and they thought they had a great. They stole everything they could, then burnt the buildings down, and had a great time. But within 2 months, the price of rice had quadrupled. No one had a job, and it came back to bite them for what they did. And but as for the investigation side of things, we formed a team of Australians, a couple of New Zealanders. There's certainly a big contingent of New Zealanders there. And they were great guys and girls, and some Solomon Islanders. And because there was so much interference by the government at the time, we identified 2 members of Parliament that were involved, and what would you say, not supported, but certainly G'd up the crowd into a point where they continued doing what they were doing. And we arrested, I think it was the foreign minister and the police minister, I think it was. I'm not too sure exactly, but I remember talking to the commissioner of the police, who was an Australian guy called Shane Castles at the time, and he says, "I'm not going to brief the commissioner if he's in custody." So,
The commissioner's in custody.
sorry, the police minister. Sorry.
The police minister. Oh yeah. I can't tell the minister for police. He's in the bin.
Yeah.
He's talking to the boys, but in another capacity right about now.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Hey, thanks for your comment too, Ms. Hickman, Alethea. It's fantastic.
I know Alethea.
Yeah. So yeah, fantastic to see you on here, and thanks very much. But look, all right. So those two.
We didn't talk about the Peter Sterling. Did you want to go back to that?
Yes, and also, look, I really want to talk about Papua New Guinea because I know you are. I love Papua New Guinea, as you know. I lived there as a kid. I've got a magnificent soft spot for the place, but I also know there's massive problems with corruption and everything. And one of the things that you were doing up there was like you were doing discipline and whatnot. I really want to hear about that too. But
yeah.
To tell us about the Sterling pinch first.
Well, I was the case officer for the Corrective Services Investigation Unit when I remember it was the day after Melbourne Cup Day in 1997, and 5 prisoners broke out of Sir David Longland's Correctional Centre in Brisbane, and one of them, of course, was Brendan Abbott, but there were a few others called. One was called Peter Thomas Sterling, one was Oliver Linzick, another one was I'll think of it shortly, but. He ended up shooting at 2 police officers in Noosa. But I think Jason Nixon, he ended up shooting at 2 police officers in Noosa, Gary Kruger and Paul Zahn. But everything was pretty, it was working around the clock at the time. It was big news. It was the front page of the paper, and certainly in every news bulletin. And we got onto a informant that told us that Peter Sterling was in a brothel at Tweed, on the Tweed Heads border. Tweed Coolangatta border, and the girl, the working girl that was with him, actually, I think, produced a newspaper to the rest of the group and said, "This is that fellow, that one of the guys that escaped." And I don't know how it came about, but this Peter Sterling ended up going home after this girl finished work, and he spent the night with her at home. And I remember thinking, how odd is this that he would do that, particularly considering she had, I think, young children at home at the time. So she was, I don't know where her brain was, but she wasn't all that smart. And I remember we found out where she was living, found out where he was staying, and I think from memory he was relieving himself off the back veranda of her house when the tactical cert guys took him out and trussed him up like a Christmas turkey, and they brought him to Broadbeach Police Station where I was waiting, and then I interviewed him, and we flew by chopper through to North Brisbane, where we put him straight into Brisbane Watch House. I remember him saying there's three things I wanted. He said, I wanted to be out for my birthday. He said, I want to get pissed, and I wanted a root. He said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. We locked him up the day before his birthday, so he missed out on his birthday.
2 out of 3 is not so bad.
That's right. That's right.
Sterlo, like, you got to be happy with that.
But certainly Jason Nixon, I was given the brief to with another officer, Jason Renwick, to go and interview him at after he shot at Paul's on and Gary Kruger, and interview him at Woodford Correctional Centre. They flew him down within several hours of what happened, and we interviewed him. And from word go, he didn't want to answer any questions, and he was being a smart ass, and he picked and chose what he wanted to answer. And there was no way in the world that the interview was ever going to be used because of all his refusals to answer questions. So we adopted the approach at the time to get what we could out of him for intelligence purposes, so we could try and find the other escapees, and that's what we did. And I remember being asked in the committal because I think he got an extra 18 years or something, I think, Nixon. But I remember getting asked in the committal by one of his barristers, and he said, Detective Sergeant, he said, how many times do you have to be told I don't want to answer questions? And I said, well, your client's got a lot of criminal history. He was playing a game with us. He knew exactly what questions he wanted to answer and what he didn't. He said if he didn't want to talk at all, he would have stopped full stop. And that seemed to be acceptable at the time.
Yeah, that's strike one up for the good guys.
Yeah.
And mate, look, tell us about all right, so you're in Papua New Guinea. You're working with the AFP up there, and you're handling discipline. And look, I mean no disrespect to the Royal Papua New Guinea Constabulary. I know that you've got some very good friends up there, and there's some competent, capable, honest police up there. But
Absolutely.
There's also some pretty serious issues up there, mate. Is there any of the jobs that you did up there you can tell us about? And then I'd like your prognosis on how things are going to go for that beautiful country that we both love so much.
That's exactly right. I'm in the same position as you. I lived there as a child for a short time, and it holds a very good, close part of my heart. And I do love the place. Beautiful country. You got a lot of issues. But I first went to PNG working in 2002. I worked there for 2002, 3 and 4. At the time, it was on an AusAid project. At the time, they used a lot of retired and serving police officers to work as advisors for the Royal PNG Constabulary. I was given the Southern Command, which covered from the Indonesian border through to the pointy bit at Milne Bay on the end. So it was basically the old Papua, if you know anything about the Papua New Guinea days. So I looked after the Western Province, which was North and South Fly. I looked after the Gulf Province, Oro, which is where Kokoda is. Worked in Kokoda Village many a time, and then Milne Bay, which is probably the jewel in the crown. Beautiful spot. And I remember one story I can tell about Milne Bay, and my wife had come up for the weekend, and we took a trip down to Milne Bay in conjunction with some work. And I just got to the police station. I knew Kim was walking around town somewhere, and or at the accommodation we were staying at. And next thing is, literally hundreds of people started rushing to the front of the police station, and then a troop carrier pulls up very quickly and dragged these couple of guys out, giving them a hiding on the way through. And I could see, I think there were 3 guys there, and there was one guy wasn't doing too much moving. And I said, "This fella here is not moving." They said, "Yes, he is. We just saw him move." And I looked a bit closer, and he had 3 bullet holes in his ribs. And I said, "Get him up," and he was dead. He was dead. I was getting him up the hospital called House Sick, get him to the house sick, and get him to the house sick, and they dragged him back out and put him in the back of the Toyota. But there was another guy crouching as wasn't the police officer, it was the crowd. The general crowd were hovering around the front counter, and next thing I saw, a bloke with a button-up shirt and tie, long pants, walk in and just kick this bloke in the head. I said, "What's going on there? Who's he?" He is, "Oh, he's the bank manager. These guys just held up the bank." So we're getting a bit of community justice to
restorative justice.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's one bloke was getting hit with a bit of 4B2, and they took him out the back to hose him all off, and yeah, it was just chaos. And then I could think of what's happening to Kim. So I raced back to the accommodation, and she was oblivious to it all. I think she was reading a book or something, but she'd just been uptown where this bank robbery occurred, and
wow,
there were 3 rascals. One was dead. I think the other 2 got some sort of conviction, a bit of summary justice, and the actual judges and the magistrates up there actually take a bit of time off if they do get a toweling, or do get a bit of summary jurisdiction and get assaulted. One of the tools of the trade is the fan belt. The fan belt's very effective in crowd control, and anything can be used, but sometimes the judges and the court do take time off if they get that sort of justice before they get their normal justice.
It just goes to show how important law, really at the top of, it depends on which hierarchy you look at, but like normally at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, law and order, that is security, is at the top. You know what I mean? And we kind of think, in pre-COVID times, we would have had this conversation and go, that just would never happen in Australia. It's not part of who we are. It's not our culture and stuff like that. Well, when you've seen people beating each other up in shopping, in shopping aisles for toilet paper, that's a human thing. That's how human beings are. And it really wouldn't take all that long for Australia to kind of end up like that.
And Matt, I use the Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea example. 50 years ago, Port Moresby was like a suburb in Australia. It had low fences, open yards. Kids would roam the street. The old Australian way of come home when the street lights come on, and that's exactly what Port Moresby was like. But through successive failures of government and a lot of things, it's become what it is today. And you mentioned that law and order should be the top of the hierarchy of needs, but see, in Papua New Guinea, majority of people have no interaction with the government. Up in the highlands, they have, the government means nothing to them, because they're all self-sufficient farmers. They're all they all subsistence. They live on what they grow. They don't get anything from the government. All they ask for occasionally is a good road to get their produce to market. But the government is failing the people of Papua New Guinea in a big way. And
well, is that a good thing? I'm genuinely interested in this, and I just want your take. So we've made an important distinction there between people who've been displaced or have displaced themselves or whatever it is, and they're living in the big cities. So they've gone from being in a village where there is someone, and I think you and I and many people watching this, because we've got a good number of viewers now too, who have worked in Cape York, Torres Straits, or there, understand that place and position in society is so much. Like, you're a someone in those places. You're the son or daughter of these people. You have a position in society, and that really matters. You lose all of that identity and all of that context when you move to the big city. Things seem to work in the villages. I don't see that as the government. Like, that's their own little system working there. Like, how effective is that up there in those places where that are relatively untouched?
There's a lot of different civilized cultures around the world that have a reciprocal arrangement or a kinship obligation type culture, where in Papua New Guinea it's the Wantok, and the Wantok was explained to me that is their social security network. They know that they can, no matter what happens in the world, they can go back to the village and survive. in the city they don't have that. They have the urban drift. The young fellows in the village, they want to experience the bright lights and all that. But in Port Moresby, in the big cities, there's no system to look after them. Their only source of income is through crime, and they don't have they don't have gardens. They don't, their families might have a house, but there might be 10, 15 families living in the house, but they always know that, and that's why the one-top culture is so strong. And it's very difficult in investigations generally, but not also in investigating police. The one-top connections, they do make it difficult to deal with them.
Yeah, the brotherhood. I mean, we get a touch of that in the police. Like the brotherhood culture is real.
Yeah.
Like it's being eroded. It's being eroded, and some of it, Fitzgerald mentioned it.
Yeah.
So there was a dark side to that. There really was, but there was a positive side to that too. Like it's not as, and I discussed this with Bluey O'Gorman on our interview, which is a good one, incidentally. So if anyone's watching that, their side interviewed Bluey O'Gorman. Well, the technical side of things, because it was in the dark, and you can't see Bluey being Irish. He tears up a few times, gets all passionate. And a couple of weeks after that, I interviewed his legendary brother, actually, who I've got equal respect for, Terry O'Gorman, who has a surprisingly sane perspective if you consider things of two sides of the same coin. It's the same thing and the same desire from a different outcome. But yeah, it's real. Like that one-top culture up there is real. And we have it here. Like we have our own little tribal networks. We've got it in the police, big time. So all right. We'll wrap up. I've got one more question about PNG. What do you think the future of that place is? Like, is it going to get better? Is there any hope in the foreseeable future? Or
I don't know, Matt. Certainly, I've developed a lot of good relationships up there, and there are a lot of good people. But I think, unfortunately, in a lot of the roles, particularly government, a lot of people stay in longer than they should over retirement age, and they don't make the vacancies available for the young ones who have the ability to make effective change. So I think they have processes and policies in place to have mandatory retirement at certain ages, but that all gets ignored because of the one-top culture. They stay in a bit longer, and in their defence too, it's they often stay in longer because they need the money. And but unfortunately, the life expectancy, I think, for a Papua New Guinea male is in the late 50s or early 60s. That's the life expectancy. So a lot of them die in the job, die whilst working, and the retirement age is out the window. But there's certainly there is a cadre of good young. Talking about the PNG constabulary here, there is a good cadre of good young officers coming up that have the ability. They just haven't got the
support networks, would that be the way?
Yeah.
They haven't got the environment where they can kind of flourish.
Yeah. And in a way too, having, I've worked as an advisor in a number of roles up there over three separate inputs, and they get a lot of strength and experience from a good solid advisor beside them too, because as an advisor, you talk them through, management issues. You talk them to, when you go on your way to a meeting, you talk to your counterpart about, what the goals and objectives are, and what you want to, what your position is going to be. So you have all those talks beforehand, and I think generally it does help, and they certainly feel, I suppose, supported in their decision making if it's talked about and discussed beforehand. And I think it's. But certainly a lot of good people with ability up there, but a lot of them aren't given the opportunity.
Yeah, it is concerning.
And as for the rest of the country, I don't know. It's such a beautiful country, but just corruption is so rife. It's at every level.
Yeah, and with China getting over there now too, and just buying the place up. I mean, that's a real concern, particularly the fish processing plant or the mega city they're going to build near Daru. Like, there's just absolutely no reason for them to build that there, and it's a base.
Absolutely, it's a base.
It's
absolutely,
a base.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nothing but, and of course the Chinese are spending money a lot around the Pacific, and have for some time, and it's not out of goodwill.
No, and as you know, I lived in China for a short time, and my Chinese is terrible. Like I ended up after leaving, my Mongolian vocab was basically okay when I left Mongolia. I could have a brief, very basic conversation like I would like food now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But so I was only limited to speaking with Chinese people who could speak English. So that implies a certain degree of education and outward-looking people. But all of them, Taiwan would come up in normal conversations while we'd be drinking beers, and they'd be saying, "Yeah, look, we got to take Taiwan back." Like, and when I say this to people over here in the West, they don't get it. It's like, well, why would I? No, you got to understand. Like, it's just such a big deal for them, and we can see the saber being rattled over there now. Yeah, and we know a lot of the money that's being spent in the Pacific areas is basically to buy votes in the UN. Absolutely. So when the invasion comes, you got enough of these tiny little islands going, no way, we recognise that it's going to be rubber stamped by the closest thing we have to some.
I think a big thing for China is food security into the future, and they got so many people, and I think it's they need that security going forward.
Exactly. But look, so you've worked as you're a decorated officer who's won a number of commendations. You've worked in the AFP, you've worked in the QPS at very high commissioned executive level. You've worked as an operational officer, drug squad tactician, Cape inspector, all of these things. Now, I'm thinking that's given you a degree of management experience, and it's given you some takeaway lessons. Now, mentoring, I know, is another big thing that you really like doing. Could you walk me through some of the learnings that you've got that you had from all this management experience? And I think you sent me an excellent email. So if you want to read off your notes, I mean, that's kind of fine. But I'd really like you to walk us through, like, what would the 19-year-old you, if you could go back and tell the 19-year-old you the learnings that you've got now, what would you say?
I think the first one would be know your trade, know how you do your job, and know how to do it well. Don't just sit there and learn the basics or the minimum of what you have to. Extend yourself, volunteer for stuff, and know your job. There's nothing less attractive in a person than someone that doesn't know the job. And I think that's probably one of the first ones I mentioned to you, Matt.
Yep. And
sorry, just on that too. It's also don't burn your bridges. It's you don't know. The person you're working with today may go on to bigger and better things, and having those networks into the 20 or 30 years time will mean a lot. Networks like the Commissioner of the Police or Minister of Immigration, stuff like that. You don't know what the future holds, so it's important to maintain those relationships and make the effort to maintain those relationships. Mean picking up the phone, not just when you want something. Pick the phone up when you just want a general conversation. Yeah.
Look, there's always a bit of a temptation to take shortcuts, and that's kind of like the police way. Can you talk on that?
Yeah, I can always particularly name this investigation, but it's an investigation where a number of shortcuts were taken, and all it took at the time was to manage the crime scene well, manage it like you should, but shortcuts were taken. This crime scene was shut down too early, and there's been books written about it, and it's hung around for 20 odd years still, and a lot of it could have been, how would you say, a lot of the questions could have been answered if that crime scene had been managed better than what it was.
I think I know the job you're talking about. What about taking risks? Like, I mean, the funny thing about police is they're happy to run into like burning buildings, and they're happy to run into kind of stuff. But when it comes to taking even calculated risks in their careers or in their lives, they're kind of reluctant to do that. Can you talk about any takeaway learnings that you've?
Oh, for sure, Matt. You hit the nail on the head where you say take calculated risks. Take the risks, make them while you're young, make it part of who you are and what you do. it's, if a job opportunity comes along, apply for a bit of leave without pay. And that's what I did first up when I worked at PNG the first time. I applied for leave without pay, and police officers aren't used to doing that. They're not used to stepping outside the organisation, and the organisation's not good at it really either, because you come back in and you put back in your place again because you've gone away and you've been disloyal, and you've done something that not many people have done, but you might have learned all these great things, but you're put back in your place now. So I think you understand what I'm talking about, Matt. You're doing what you did within China and Mongolia, which the majority of people don't do it. They talk about it, they ask you all the questions and say, yeah, I'm going to do exactly what you're doing, but they never take a step further. But individually, the members need to look at those opportunities and grab them, and the organisation needs to look at how they treat people when they come back and to what they've learned, instead of just putting them back in the box. And
yeah, you're right. It's a double-sided thing. I mean, people fall in love with the idea of things. Like, I'd like to do this. It's the idea of it. But the practical running through and the sacrifices you've got to make, because in anything you do, there's sacrifices. People aren't willing to kind of pay the price. But the QPS, and I'm out now, so I gain nothing by saying this. I still love the QPS.
Absolutely.
For all of its faults. And, maybe I am a beaten spouse. Someone's kind of suggested to me, it's like, Maloney, you're a beaten spouse. You don't know that you don't know that you're being DV'd. You're in the delusional kind of stage where, I don't know, I've taken a bit of a step back from it, and I'm never going to go back. I've done my time, but it was basically not a bad organisation, and I know it's in constant state of change, and things are changing very, very rapidly now. I get that. I still don't regret joining. I had a great time, but one of the things the police was bad at back then was exactly that thing you're talking about, was recognising that when you go out, you bring something back, and you were treated, again, like a spouse. It was such a spousal relationship. It's like, okay, so you've had your little fling with the AFP, and you've run off and had a little bit of fun in China, and now you're back and you're in the doghouse. And you're going to be in the doghouse, and it's like, sir, did you with your little fling with your little other organisation didn't work out so well with you? And I was like, that's how they treat people, and that's how I felt.
It's an immature way to deal with situations, and instead of looking at, gee, I might learn something. People often ask me, what's the AFP like compared to the QPS? And I say to them, there's things the QPS do great, there's things they don't do not so great. The same with the AFP. It's the same but different. The AFP are great at a lot of things, but there's some things that they're not so great at. Yeah. But it's I've not regretted. I did 24 years with the Queensland Police, and I did 10 with the Feds, and I enjoyed. There wasn't too many parts of my career I didn't enjoy. Yeah. A couple of superiors I didn't particularly like, but that's like any organisation, and but you got to learn to fight your battles too. And I think I made a bit of a mistake in one of those battles, but out of that came some good. It's I've got no complaints with the way my career's gone.
Yeah, same. Actually, I've got to be honest. If I could do it all again, there's some things I would do different. But as we were saying before, I would have done it for free the first 10 years. Like, seriously. Like, if they just had said to me, okay, here's beer money, somewhere to live, go live in the barracks for 10 years. Like, you get paid to go all over the state.
That's right.
Like, oh, Maloney, we need someone. And it was great. Like, if you were flexible, Maloney, we need someone at Arakoon. Yeah.
You don't have to pay fuel money.
Yeah. Like, Kate, my long-suffering then fiance, and now wife, poor woman, she'd get these phone calls sometimes, like, 2 hours after I finish shift. She goes, oh, what time are you going to be home? I said, next on the 13th. Where are you? Arakoon flared up. Lockhart River flared up. It's like, Jimmy Rankin grabbed me when I was walking up the hall. It's like, I wouldn't swap that.
That special event we were supposed to be attending. Well, you're going by yourself. Yeah.
That's it. You and a bunch of guys, like you've had 2 hours, like Rankin's gone, okay, guys, Arakoon's flared up. 2 hours back here, swags. Guys, we say it's going to be for, we say it's 5 days, but it's probably going to be longer. So make sure you got a fair, make sure you got a good supply of Reg Grundies. Bring back some food. make sure you get all your kit, airport, 2 hours time. And so you and a whole bunch of blokes are out there, you're flying out. And, oh, man, it was the best thing. I couldn't believe it.
You're right, mate. It's many times I've pinched myself and saying, how good is I'm getting paid to do this.
Yeah, and being flown around by guys like Les Sharp. Yes, Sharpie, I'm talking to you. Who I'm pretty sure is watching. Eamon Lyons and those other legends.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, look, I'm really keen to kind of like I'm enjoying this a little bit too much, which is always a sign that I should be like wrapping it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just want to acknowledge that you did win an award too, that Australasian Council of Women in Policing Award. I'd love you to kind of explain that, but you can wrap that in with some of the lessons you've learned about leadership as well. So you specifically talked about these taking risks and stuff like that. And can you talk about putting your family first and mixing that in there with mistakes and stuff like that? Can you have a quick discussion about that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes leaders can make is that looking to apportion blame, and I think the QPS in its past has been big on blame management and looking to blame the person responsible instead of looking at lessons learned and how can we improve on it. And as a leader, if there's no use duck shoving your mistakes downward. If you make a mistake, you own it. I think you can win a lot of respect from staff by owning up to things that haven't gone well. And there's nothing wrong with things going wrong. Well, it's like I heard a saying the other day: if you vote the same at 20 as you do at 50, you haven't lived. Your view changes, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's just progression. And
so putting family first and work-life balance, is that just a
cliche? That is tough on Matt, and I think the Melanesians have got it right. They say when they say they put their family first, they mean it. And but I think the Australians, generally speaking, we say we put our family first. We try to, but sometimes the family comes up short. And as I was saying, you look back on your life and some of the mistakes and decisions you made has impacted on the family a bit more than what it should have, and there's been repercussions for that. But it's I love my 4 boys. I talk to them nearly always daily, I think
it matters.
We could do that better. And my advice from an old man to a young one, to anyone's listening, is that try and get that. And I think the next generation is a bit better at it than my generation. That they do have their time out for themselves. They do, they do look at as a young detective or young constable, it was always all the work was done in the pub, and we didn't do much for relationships, didn't do much for family, and that doesn't happen nowadays. When I think the last job I had before I resigned, I was in charge of the criminal investigation branch in Cairns, and very few of those guys drank. They're always doing training in the afternoon, or they're doing something with their families. And you had to taken that 20 years prior, and that wouldn't have been the case. The expectation was that you'd be down the pub having beers, and that side of things good, because it's the drinking culture certainly ruined a lot of families and ruined a lot of lives too. But I think we're getting better. And you mentioned it also before about the blue culture and how it's how it is getting eroded. But a lot of people fail to mention the good side of that blue culture too. It's not only the negative side. And,
it's not that simplistic. It's not this is a bad thing. We've kind of got to destroy it. It's just. Yeah. But look, I can think of some of the other, because you're a bit of a mentor to me, and I don't mind articulating that clearly. Throwing a few flowers, and it sincerely was. But one of the things that you kind of told me was you got to think of where you want to be in the organisation. So do you want to be the problem solver or the problem fixer, the kind of like head kicker? Like, what's your take on that? What's one of the takeaways that you've had on that?
Well, I think every organisation or group or subgroup within that needs someone to call it how it is. It's more often than not, I think a lot of people fall in the trap of telling the bosses what they want to hear instead of telling it how it was. telling you how it is. And I recall during the Solomon Islands investigation of the riots, and that we were briefing the chief super, who was briefing the commissioner, and the chief super put unreasonable expectations on us to get a result, and a favourable result, and she had to be told that that the result would come when the evidence was there, and there was certainly difficulty. So telling every organisation needs someone to tell her how it is, and if I turn to send a message to any leader, any manager, it's their job to dilute, I suppose, or protect the staff from all that political stuff that goes on above them, and also tell them how it is.
Some of the best leaders I've had are the ones that cultivate that, that want to sit you down and go, look, tell me something I don't want to hear. You know what I mean? That's the that's tell me something that I need to know that I don't want to hear.
Well, and you know from talking to offenders, and that you tell them how they often ask what's going to happen to me, what am I going to blah blah blah. The worst thing you can do is tell them, no mate, you'll be right, you won't even go to jail, because that's the only thing I remember. The first thing you got to tell them is, mate, this is a possibility you might go to jail, or tell them the worst case scenario. And that's the same with bosses. Tell them the worst case scenario, because if it gets better, you look good.
Exactly. Mate, the Ben Eichen story, I remember you kind of told me that a little bit in the past too, or, the interview that he did.
I read an article about Ben Eichen. He was interviewed for the CEO, I think the CEO spot after at the Broncos, and he asked during the panel interviews who the head kicker in the organisation is, and they said no one could answer that. So he missed out on the CEO's job, and because he went so well in the interview and asked those difficult questions, they took him on later on contract for head of football. So you talk about having that person have that uncomfortable conversation, because very few people, I would say no one likes conflict. And I remember doing a management course in Sydney at the Australian Institute of Police Management, and they put it like this. They said, feedback is a gift, because quite often people are too afraid to tell you the honest truth. So if you get feedback, you can take it as a gift instead of an offence, and I think that's important. And we live in the times where if you make a mistake, taking a risk, oh, you're an idiot. How could you? But
that's.
I think the only time for growth is when you get outside your comfort zone and you take a risk. It's you learn from it. The old saying, the worst is a bad decision is better than no decision. So it's better to take that risk on what evidence you have and make the call. In the benefit of hindsight, down the track, it might be a terrible decision, but at the time, it's the best one you can make.
That's right, or the least worst. Look, the last question I'm going to ask is, because we've been going for an hour and a half. I'm going to have to wrap this up, as much as I'm enjoying it. So I know there's going to be a lot of coppers out there, and some of the kind of quasi comments and questions I'm getting are around this theme. So if coppers are a little bit concerned that they don't have saleable skills outside because they don't have written qualifications, what would you say to people? What would you say to coppers who are thinking, maybe I should give something else a go, maybe I should step outside of policing, or maybe I should try something else?
I think coppers generally have a lot of skills that people want. You got the conflict resolution, mediation skills we deal with on a daily basis. I think those sorts of things you can carry. But my advice there, if you can formalise some of your qualifications, formalise them. Whilst I was in PNG the second time, I had a bit extra time on my hands, so I studied through Charles Sturt University and got some tertiary qualifications. But we've got a younger generation coming through. They're smart. They've got the formal qualifications. What they lack is the experience, which we've got, which generally as police officers have. But if you get on the same page as them with a few formal qualifications and the experience, you're unbeatable, I reckon.
Absolutely. Look, mate, on that, we're going to have to wrap it up. And we're getting a lot of love. So big thanks to everybody who's come on and asked questions. So Ms. Russ,